Right. Good afternoon. My name is Ian McCauley. I'm a member of the ManKind project and speaking here on their behalf. Thank you very much for welcoming me here today. So the ManKind project started many years ago. There were a group of 3 men who had served together and felt that camaraderie of men in adverse circumstances seeking connection without caretaking. So real relationships without rescue. And they had seen, as they came out of military service, that the civilian world, the rest of the world, didn't have tribes anymore, didn't have groups anymore. It was men isolated in silos, not feeling, not connecting. People asking them if they were okay, and them not knowing how to respond. Because the answer that everybody wants to hear is, yeah, I'm okay. Because what do you do when someone says, I'm not okay? You need to connect. And we've forgotten how to connect as men. We know how to rescue women. We've been programmed that in a lot of ways. There are movements fighting against that caretaking without connection. We don't fight against that. We just try to go a different way. So the ManKind project is first of all about integrity, accountability, honesty, inclusivity, and community. It's a non-denominational organization, right? A man can bring his spirituality into it if he chooses. A man brings whatever he brings to that circle. Once a week in, goodness, I'm not even sure how many countries. Many countries around the world. There are 50,000 of us. Men travel to Australia and hook up with a group when they're on business there. I picked a man up last month and brought him to a meeting, and never met him before. He was just up on our meetup group, friend of a friend, visiting on holidays from Australia. So it's a loose community with some pretty hard rules. We sit in a circle. Every man is there as an equal by choice without obligation. What happens in the circle stays in the circle. Men have been getting together and sitting in circles, be it around a fire, or in a community hall or a library room, for thousands of years. As equals, just downloading and opening up their box of stuff that they carry around and sharing that with other men in a connected way. Where, hey, I'm not alone, is the big take-home message coming out of that experience. It's very easy to feel alone. I've got an electronic watch on my wrist that gives me texts. I've got Facebook. I have more Facebook friends than I have real friends. I've got all these things that look like connection, but I can't sit and talk with somebody and see their expression and have them see my expression and actually be seen and actually be heard without sitting down with another human being. A lot of what we do in MKP, ManKind Project, is that. So we have some structure. Men tend to understand just how we're socialized, things in terms of risk, reward, problem solving. I myself looked at myself as a problem to be solved for many years because it wasn't how I wanted to be. And I wasn't connecting with actually how I felt, because it made me feel horrible, because I felt empty and I felt sad and I felt angry and I felt unimportant and I didn't know what to do. And so I just hide it, deny it, and repress it and try and bash on. And eventually it doesn't work anymore and you just want to stop. So I had my moment where I decided I've had enough of this. I want to be who I actually am. And I went on Meetup, and I looked up men's support groups. I'd sat in circles before, but it was all about where I'd come from, not about where I was going. And the ManKind Project, for me, in my judgment, in my experience, is really about where am I going to go? What do I want? I have to ask myself some questions and give some hard answers to be able to do that work. What am I? Who am I? Who is Ian? What do I want? Sometimes those answers are pretty scary. because it feels like who I am isn't good enough for what I want, then that's where the work begins. And what do I choose? So what am I, what do I want, and what do I choose to do? I can work that in either direction. Men have fought and died for stupid reasons and good reasons. Men have given their lives selflessly to save people that they've never even known. In that moment, at that time, that giving is a choice. Men, because of how we're socialized, and a little bit of DNA, testosterone comes into play there as well. We will do things by choice that we would never do by obligation. Right? We will choose to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and drive across town and help a friend who's struggling, because he calls and asks, will you help me? But we'll stand there and, you know, soldier up, and I'm going to die on this hill because somebody told me to do something that goes against my basic beliefs of right and wrong. In MKP, we're all about choice. We recognize that there are obligations. We look at needs and wants and wishes. It is selfish by nature, by definition, to put wants, personal wants, against the needs of somebody else. I don't take seconds until everybody's had their share, and then we share equally what's left. Each according, so that everybody gets some. When I go and sit in a circle, I know that that's how that place works at that time. I don't see a lot of that out in the rest of the world. I see people taking as much as they can carry, and taking from others because they wish and they want, and being oblivious to the needs of others. Men being oblivious to the needs of men, women, and children, and those other groups in turn just being off in their own silo, just trying to get something so that they don't feel empty and disconnected. Happiness, for me, is a contentment with how things are. And when I'm not happy, I try to solve that. I used to, I still do a bit, I'm tempted, by putting fun into my life, because fun feels like happy in certain moments. But fun's foods, fun's chemicals, fun's adrenaline, sports, fun's danger, and all those things that work like the stereotype of conventional macho. And a lot of times, that's putting my need for satisfaction above my safety and the safety of others. And that's not wrong, it's just unbalanced, right? It feels and it works like taking choice away from others. I would not want that choice taken away from me. So, to fill that in, I am, I want, I choose. I choose to act rightly, because I want to be connected as an equal with others. And I'm in. And MKP is part of who I am, part of what I do, and also part of what I want to be. It's just, when it comes down to it, a group of men sitting down, sharing the experience, time, their energy, their willingness, their choice, to try to make the world as they see it, as they understand it, as they can reach it, with their arms and with their influence, to make it a little better than it was the day before, a little more sustainable than it was the day before, a little simpler maybe than it was the day before. Thank you.
Perfect. Can I ask you a question?
Please, yes.
If you have questions. You kind of mentioned tribalism, and I was just curious about that, because it usually has a negative connotation. Like when you see the Middle East and the divisiveness it causes, especially racism is kind of like a type of tribalism, and it can be really divisive sometimes. So like, how would you kind of talk about the tribe in your context?
We have initiated and uninitiated men, and we don't treat them any differently. There's just a recognition that this man's been initiated, that man hasn't been initiated. There are no differences in rights, privileges, or obligations. It's just a choice that a man can make. And there are different, it's just a different container. He's been initiated, he hasn't been initiated.
Okay.
There's no hierarchy. It's tribe by choice rather than tribe by allocation and by ideal. It's not necessary for a man to take part in the initiation. We have men who have sat in a circle for years and remain uninitiated, and they're no less respected, no less welcome, no less valued than men who have been initiated. Conventional tribalism is about in-group, out-group, us versus them. There are lots of theories of morality and behavior. Jonathan Haidt is a particular favorite of mine. He really gets into that whole, there's an emotional content to it beyond the compassion and integrity piece that really goes unrecognized. And men are especially vulnerable and can fall prey to that very, very easily because of how men are socialized to react and interact emotionally. I can go and sit in circle and I talk about how I feel, or I don't talk about how I feel. I choose or don't choose openly to do that. It's almost like transparency is the opposite of anonymity. You can hide things with anonymity and it can be misused, but transparency is very difficult to misuse. It's a lot simpler, it's a lot cleaner. You don't get as far with it, but the steps are smaller, simpler, more robust, and more sustainable. So little victories every day.
Okay. Another thing I was wondering about, I think I saw on YouTube or on Facebook, I've seen some, the first idea I had of ManKind project was actually videos of hero, people doing everyday hero stuff, and it was all men. Is that a project from ManKind, or was that a different one?
There's an association with that. Acts of service are meaningful to men and helpful to the community at large. We do, by being good men, for lack of a better term, that behavior encourages and it acts like a pebble which causes ripples. So is there a strict agenda with that? No. Does the culture encourage that? Yes, because if you've got a group of honest men with integrity, who want to include people in their community, you're going to get that societal push for betterment and help without the need for it being transactional. It's not about reciprocity. It's not about paying forward with us. It's about giving away. So to get back to tribalism, I've discussed with men, we do have some rituals, some, if you will, ritual ceremonies within ManKind Project, which harken back to an older time. It's easy in North America for that to get conflated with Native culture, because it's really the oldest culture we've got that was undisturbed in North America. So 1,000, 1,500 years ago, it was pretty much Native culture before the French and the Spaniards came. And it was undisturbed for a very long time. With multiple wars over tiny little bits of farmland in Europe, there were so many invasions and so many different empires that stability of culture, the ancient ways, became lost. 8,000 years ago, the Finns had saunas that don't look much different than saunas do now, except that the wood wasn't sawn, it was rough hewn. So they would make a wooden door and make a sauna in a cave with hot rocks. 8,000 years ago, Neolithic times. So men have been sitting and sweating together in Scandinavia for 8,000 years. If we had settlements in North America, given the slightly nomadic nature of the native people, they didn't have permanent settlements that lasted quite that long. There were places they would go to. There are stories of sweats taking place in the native cultures and areas where they would gather to trade or feast or hunt for thousands of years. One is no less valid, and one is no less accessible than the other. It's just the oldest thing we've got in North America that's undisturbed is native culture. So there tends to be an easy gravitation towards that. But men have been sitting in a circle around a fire with hot rocks on it, pouring water, and their yayas out since Neolithic times in many places around the world. So it's a synthetic tribe, if you will, a tribe by choice rather than a tribe by birthright, or a tribe by skin color, or a tribe by belief.
Okay.
And there is no opposite tribe that you need to fight against. You know, it's just a sense of community.
It's not about adversity.
Right.
My greatest enemy is myself. What gets in the way of me, when I really look at it, when I look at my shadows, what do I deny and repress? If I take that out and I put it in front of me, it's me getting in the way of me. Because I'm the one that's telling myself I'm not good enough. Because nobody else seems to notice those little details that put me into a spin. Nobody else seems to notice that I'm the one being hard on myself. Everybody else is just too busy with their stuff to be unpleasant to me, and the voice inside my head telling me that I can't do this and I should probably just give up is on any given day usually me. It's not coming from the outside. It's noise inside my head. It's a story I tell myself because I'm uncomfortable with being quiet, because I was never shown, I didn't learn, I didn't experience what it was like to be emotionally connected and just be allowed to be.
I have a question.
Please.
Yeah, I was just wondering about women, because women don't come to the peer circles for Cathay for a similar reason, because it kind of changes the dynamic, and that's kind of an educational thing for me that I had to learn, because there's been, I kind of regret it, but there's been times where I've kind of got into it with a Freemason, or like, and I was kind of attacking him because he didn't include women in this, and I'm starting to understand now about how men kind of bond in these peer circles, and kind of how the dynamic. I'm sure that probably comes up where you have some animosity or from women, or suspicions, or so. Like, what kind of like how, like, what's kind of your position on women?
Okay. Women are the other half of the human species, right? Before and after I got involved in the ManKind project, I don't view women any differently. They're no less mysterious, no less fascinating, no less different than they were before I started doing men's work. I'm different. I see myself differently. And I'm not going to go citing psychological papers, but we don't actually live out there. We see out there through our perceptions, and there's so much filtering. And so I live through my projections and my perceptions of the world. And a lot of how I think the world actually is, well, it's just Ian's version, and it's not really real, but it's real to me, and it's the big underpinning of my experience.
Have you got any criticism from women's lobbies groups or anything like that?
We have had inquiries, and our answer is very simple. When women interact with men, it's a different dynamic than men interacting with men. And if men hold women accountable, then there's a gender role, social role differential. There's a differential there. Because there's different experiences. We're seeing two different sides of the equation. If women hold women accountable, it's different, not better or worse, just different. And if men hold men accountable, it's different. The best version is personal accountability. And so if I sit in a circle, I can choose to participate or not. If I choose not to accept the ground rules, well then I've made a choice to opt out on that night. Right? If I won't keep confidentiality, if I won't not tone policing, not language policing, but it's not about hate speech, right? Freedom of speech and hate speech, there's a pretty, am I saying it to express my feelings, or am I saying it to beat another person down? If I'm doing something to somebody else which takes their choice or their freedom to act away, then that's indistinguishable from oppression, repression. It's all seen as negative and should be. We don't do that. Again, it's choice versus obligation. Any man can opt out or pause or call safety on a process if he thinks it's going to get weird. Again, we've got each other's backs in that situation because things can get heated. And so, hey guys, let's check this. Stop, it's getting a little weird. Let's talk about how it got weird. That's not easy to do with a mixed group. It's just a case of convenience and simplicity. Men will have conversations in a group of men that they would never have conversations with their wife. I've told men in a circle things I would never tell anyone in the outside world, because I know that it's just going to stay there. I watch hands go up that I never thought I'd see go up, because other men are identifying with what I'm saying. And that is an indescribable feeling. I can tell you what it feels like. Hope. It's a connectedness that doesn't exist easily out there, because it needs to be in a certain container. When that container's opened, it's vapor. It just goes out into the world and becomes incredibly diluted. It can be concentrated in that container. Women will tell their best friends, or their hairdresser. Women will tell their hairdresser, stereotype, I realize, things that they won't tell their best friend. Men will tell their barber things that they would never tell their best friend, because there's just that understanding that it's okay in that situation. The real world is very, very complicated. It's easy to take things in a room, lay down ground rules, put people in that room, simplify the situation, keep it as real as possible, but it's still an artificial construct, right? I leave that room, I get in the same car that I came in, I go to the same house that I left, I go back to the same job as I did the day before, and everything's the same. What I take away is I'm a little bit different. So in that time, it's not about anything other than the man who's doing his work and the men who are holding space and the circle. It's not about, it's not for or against or about women. It's not, we don't get pulled in directions that are outside of that circle. If something's happening in the outside, we try to contain that energy, that experience, so that there aren't the myriad of distractions that there are in the outside world. Mm-hmm. So it's not about excluding women.
I know.
It's about simplifying the process.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah,
We do have couples retreats, and there is a group called Women in Power. Each, I think, who could benefit from a lot of traction. It ebbs and flows, as does, do things with men's work as well. Sometimes there's a huge bout of enthusiasm. Unfortunately, reason and rationale and respect tend not to be as powerfully motivating to groups in the short term. You don't get that groundswell as much as you would against adversity. Somebody's impressing us, let's all get together. And that's really interesting for me, because it's about what I'm against versus what I'm actually for. I have a really hard time identifying what I'm not versus what I want to be. Okay, I know I'm not all those things. None of that helps me figure out what I'm going to do tomorrow and how I'm going to be tomorrow, because I've lost the goal. I just know that I don't want any of the garbage that I've left behind. It's very difficult to get groups of people motivated. It's very easy to just have a connection with one person, and then it's not about motivation anymore. Because it's already happened. They don't need to gear up for that, it's just a connection. It's something we're naturally programmed as humans to do. And if I wait until I feel like doing something, I'm never going to actually do it. Because as a primate, I'm programmed to avoid danger and keep myself safe. That's in my DNA. So if I focus on the results and go, if I do it right, there's a way to, hook in and not fall off the edge, then I'll actually go and do that. If I can turn that into an experience where it'll be safe, it's okay to do it, then the motivation isn't irrelevant, it's just different. It's not about getting myself to do it, it's about continuing to do it.
Okay.